Yo, what's going on, guys? Crispy Flakes here. Welcome to Extra Crispy. For today's video, we are going to be reacting to ranking the NBA's top 10 shooting guards of the 2010s. Video by Dom2K. Link to his channel in the description below. So let's go ahead and get started on this, man. You know, obviously, James Harden, D Wade, Rip Hamilton, Ray Allen, guys like that. I would probably say would be on this list, but we'll see.
Oof, this was a tough one. Joe Johnson started this decade off as one of the hotter commodities at the shooting guard position, but cooled off about halfway through the decade. Meanwhile, you had Lou Williams, who literally won his first Sixth Man of the Year trophy in 2015, also halfway through the decade, before going on to win two more to the point that the trophy may as well have been named after him. However, I cannot deny Joe Johnson this 10th spot.
Just
he
make
made
him like
4 All-Star teams
10A,
this
10B.
decade, which was actually a continuation from the 3 he earned in the 2000s, and he also picked up an All-NBA team in 2010. I think that Lou Williams' best day started in the year 2018, whereas Joe was still playing out his best days through the first 4 years of this decade. When you consider everything, it's really close, but I'm gonna go ISO Joe here. Lou Williams is either going to be 11 or 10B, but I definitely thought it was worth mentioning him here. He's done some work this decade.
At least he gets to be the little transition thing.
Good old Ray. His decline throughout the 2010s was very steep and very fast, and despite the fact that he has not played a single game since the year 2014, it is still on site with Boston fans. Yet, I'd still give him the 9th spot. He deserves to be on this list.
Oh my
because
God.
he was finishing out an illustrious career with some pretty meaningful moments in this decade.
5 years.
He was a vital part of Boston making the finals in 2010, where he set what was then the record for the most three-pointers in a finals game. He went on to break the all-time three-point record the very next year in what was his final All-Star appearance of his career, and then when he likely could have still been starting for some team somewhere, he went on to accept a bench role on the Miami Heat, where he went on to hit maybe the biggest shot.
That's a champion right there. That's why he has another ring, Carmelo. Because he decided that, hey, I'm still a good basketball player, but there's a lot of other good dudes out there, so maybe I'll take a more limited role, but I'll still, when my name's called, I'll put in the work. Just listen to that, Melo, if you're watching this video.
In NBA Finals history. This was all with respectable scoring outputs for the first 3 years of the decade, considering the circumstances. You could argue Joe Johnson was a better player through that time, maybe, but he wasn't really ever contributing in meaningful basketball through the last of his best days, and he just kind of slowly fizzled out as a journeyman halfway through the 2010s, as he's still trying to make a roster today. He was just cut by the Detroit Pistons. So ISO Joe
Not everyone can make it as a Piston,
but with some of what Ray was able to accomplish at the beginning of this decade, combined with some decent output still, I'm gonna give him the 9th spot here.
Fair enough.
Manu Ginobili, routinely shrinking the chance for better stats so he could contribute to the San Antonio Spurs.
Another winner, man.
Well, he was actually still a major contributor when San Antonio won their final title of the dynasty back in 2014, and managed to make it all the way to 2018 before he decided to
Man, I just think about that block he had on James Harden, though. I just remember that highlight in particular when it comes to Manu Ginobili. Just that, oh my God, it was such a great defensive play.
He was still a decent contributor at that point, considering he was pushing 40. Ironically, one of the best years of his career was in the year 2011 when he made one of only 2 career All-Star teams, as he started all but 1 game. And he also had an All-Star worthy year in 2010. His last few years on the bench were also a bit better than Allen's, considering that was the role he'd played most of his career anyways. And when you take into account age for each year, he was good at it until the day he retired. He pretty much just outlived Allen throughout this decade, and through that time, there was never a moment where he just seemed washed and useless.
Bro, where's Rip Hamilton at?
Bradley Beal has spent most of the last 5 seasons getting better and becoming one of the top 2 guards in the league, all the way to the point where he averaged 26 points a game last year, then disappointed absolutely everybody by signing a 2-year extension to continue running like a track star and not contending for the Washington Wizards. He's only 26 years old and he was drafted in 2012, so the 2 All-Star appearances and efficient scoring he's racked up to this point are enough to get him on the top 10 list, but no higher than the guys that kind of had to be here by default. His best days are probably going to accumulate throughout the 2020s, and hopefully at some point in that time we see him on a contending roster. Otherwise, his career is looking to play out quite similar to Joe Johnson's in a sense.
Nah, he's trying to get paid. He wants that super max.
DeMar DeRozan at 6. The more I say it, the less I like it. This guy has had a tough go of it throughout the decade. There's a lot of weird stuff going on here.
And you guys call me a Spurs man, like Dom literally agreeing. He's like, I don't like it, man. I don't like it.
He was an impressive scorer in Toronto considering he was a non-3-point shooting guard in a shooting era, which did culminate in him being a top 5 scorer in 2017, but then there's that ridiculously dark cloud hanging over his head that spells out LeBronto. That's his legacy so far. That's what he's known for. Being good, but never quite good enough to get his team past LeBron James, no matter how untalented his team was. And they weren't just getting beaten, they got swept the last year he was there. So then he gets traded to the Spurs, where he's basically been forgotten about and loses his all-star status for the first time since 2015.
He said it,
On
not
top
me.
of that, the year he was traded to the Spurs, his team goes all the way to win the title. Everything is circumstance, of course,
Bad
but
luck.
none of it looks great for him no matter how you slice it, especially how his playoff performances never lived up to what he was building in the regular season. So when you take everything into account over the decade, I'd say DeRozan has been good, but not great. Also, let's be honest, his lack of a 3-point shot has definitely held him back during this era. Being able to shoot threes does not define a player, but when you have the potential that he's had this decade and been so close to true stardom, it's a glaring omission. It's something that both he and his team could have used. DeRozan has been a good shooting guard, but he is not top 5 for me this decade. Jimmy Butler began his rise to stardom around the time.
Is Jimmy a shooting guard or a small forward? Because I just don't know anymore. He plays like both positions, doesn't he? I literally don't know what position this man's. I always consider more of a small forward. He was a shooting guard, I guess, in the Bulls. Was he though? He wasn't. He was sometimes. Till Luol Deng left him with the small forward. I don't know.
Chicago was ending the road stage, which inherently meant that the Bulls roster and situation was
scientific
always
evidence does not add up.
Then he was traded to the Wolves after the Bulls went into full rebuild and helped them to their first playoff appearance since the Kevin Garnett era. Then after beating their starting lineup with third stringers, he was traded to Philly, where he helped them to within a game of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Just for that.
Now he resides in Miami in a situation that looks pretty promising. Butler in this time has also made 4 All-Star teams and racked up 6 All-NBA teams, 4 of which were defensive. I feel very good about giving Jimmy Butler the 5th spot this decade over DeMar DeRozan.
Jim, if you're watching this video, you're welcome to join the Detroit Pistons anytime you want. We'll accept you here. You just have that badness to you. I think you would fit in great. So if you're watching this, give me a call or at ChrisFlakes2K on Twitter, whatever works best for you, and we'll set something. We'll set up a meeting.
DeRozan. He's been the better player, and I think all he's been missing throughout the decade was a stable team and situation to build in, which is why I was pleasantly shocked when he left what looked like a great situation in Philly. Nevertheless, in the times that he's been moved, teams have wound up going further than they did before him. Hate him or love him, he's got a clear effect on teams, and if he helps lead Miami to a 4 seed this year, there won't be any legitimate ways left to deny his impact. Kobe Bean Bryant.
Kobe at 4.
How did one of the greats of our game end up becoming underrated? That's a different topic. When I originally did this list, I had Kobe much lower, but a closer look at his first 4 years of this decade made it difficult to rank anybody above him who hadn't truly accomplished anything. It starts with him winning a championship and a finals MVP to open up the decade. That was on the back end of a repeat, on a bum knee and a ratchet finger. He averaged 27 a game that year on 46% shooting, and was still arguably the best player in the game. Those aren't my words, those are LeBron James's words in 2009.
Yo, I like that. Throw that LeBron, man. That's what LeBron said. Man, he just shut up every single LeBron hater with that, or Kobe hater with that one, man. Good, that was good.
That changed by 2010. He also racked up 7 All-NBA teams, only one of which was a second team in that short amount of time. By comparison, nobody else on this list so far passed that amount even with more games and healthy years played. His defense was probably the only real decline he experienced through the next few years, as he went on to have arguably the best year of his career in 2013. That, again, is a different topic, but it was clear that he'd pushed himself to his physical limits during that time, which culminated in the unofficial ending of his career. The year after that is what drags his case down, and all the years after that, as a matter of fact. See, he didn't just not get any better, actually he actively got worse, and it came at a time where he probably should have just called it quits after the 2014 injury. Those all-star appearances don't count towards this ranking because they were very obviously sympathy votes and nowhere near deserving. He walked off under his own power, but at the expense of his field goal percentage, and just overall image if we're being honest. Still, no player that we've talked about on this list to this point was anywhere close to being as good or accomplished as he was during the start of the decade. So while his last few years keep him from going any higher,
if you give Bradley Beal, the last few years, you gotta give Kobe the beginning of the years. That's just how it works. unless you were like part of like the 2010 draft class and you played like all 10 years and you became like better and stuff. But yeah, you're gonna have players at the beginning and players at the end pretty much.
10 through 2013
and players in the
is
middle.
easily enough to get him in front of the other names here.
I guess middle literally makes sense.
D-Wade won 2 titles and helped the Heat make 4 finals appearances in the 2010s. He was an all-star until 2016, obviously being handed a final appearance last year, and was able to tag on his final 5 All-NBA teams throughout the decade. What places him in front of Kobe is the fact that he too was one of the best players in the league to start the 2010s, but he lasted as a serviceable player all the way until last season, where he pretty much convinced us that he was still good enough to continue to play. However, that's what we want from the great ones. To have that final image of them being competitive in more than just flashes, no pun intended. The only season that was actually bad for him in the 2010s was 2018, where he was bounced between Cleveland and Miami. Aside from that, he kept it together better than we thought he could. So Wade earned his 3rd spot here, which is ironic because he's also the 3rd greatest shooting guard of all time.
So James Harden, who else? Klay Thompson.
Klay Thompson hit his prime during the 2010s and became either the 3rd or 2nd greatest shooter of all time in a very short stint depending on who you ask. He's posted some of the most amazing single-game shooting performances in history, and has even got some of the greatest playoff performances that dubbed him Game 6 Klay. He's been an all-star each year since 2015, made All-NBA 3rd team twice despite being a 2nd option, and somehow only made 1 All-Defensive team, despite doing a good job taking Steph's matchups a lot of the time and being known for supreme 3-and-D. It feels weird to have what has essentially been a catch-and-shoot player ranked 2nd best at his position for a decade, but that's just how damn good he's been. You could easily argue that if he wasn't on the Warriors, or if he wasn't as good as he has been, the last 5 years would have never happened. We haven't seen him as a first option in any extended amount of time, but he's played his role at a star level. Oh, and don't forget the 3 rings and being one.
Hey, some dudes just don't need to be the #1 option. They'll still look great. I think Klay Thompson, I don't think you get the most out of Klay's game if he is the #1 option. I think that's why he's so great, is because he has the ego to take a step back and, you know, be the 2nd or 3rd guy in command. He's just like, no, he's like, I'm still gonna get it done. Like, and that just works. That just works for him.
One of the most important factors to the Golden Dynasty. Klay definitely deserves the 2nd spot here. I think from a talent perspective, if you were to put him up against some of the names that we've mentioned on this list, some people would probably take their chances with him as the 1st option.
Taking Klay over Kobe, guys?
So, yeah, those were the 9 best shooting guards this decade after James Harden.
This one's
no,
easy.
Seriously. He's the only guy on this list with an MVP award won in this decade, and many have argued he's deserved more than just 1. So, he's consistently in that
Some argue he don't deserve
consistently
any.
Competing for being the best player in the league, and he's been doing so while taking and making some of the toughest and craziest shots we've seen, while leading a team to wins at a contending level. He's played a lot of point guard this decade as well, and as he's proven he could do so, he is likely the best passing shooting guard on this list. He's made 7 all-star teams since having been traded to Houston to become the franchise cornerstone. He picked up a 6th Man of the Year trophy before that, and he's been an All-NBA 1st team every year except 1 since 2014. Oh, and to my point earlier, he's also placed 2nd in MVP voting 3 times in the 2010s. So how many MVPs he could actually have, that's up for discussion, but it could very easily be more than 1. Without mentioning that he was the only player to come close to leading a team to defeating the Kevin Durant Warriors, Harden is comfortably the best shooting guard this decade. Everything from what he's accomplished to longevity, it's all there. Hate him, hate his playstyle, hate his free throws. There is no legitimate argument of a shooting guard ranking above him in the 2010s. So that's my ranking. Now you can put your—
Okay, that is the end of the video there. I would say he's nailed it, man. He absolutely nailed it. And Dom2K, like, he's one of the dudes I respect the most out of the 2K community. He just like, well, NBA community, I guess I should say, man. He knows his shit, man. I think that was a really good list, really nicely put together. Maybe you can make arguments about who should go in front of who. Maybe there's like one guy around like the 10th or 9th spot that you could probably add in. But yeah, guys, let me know in the comment section below. Who do you all think Dom2K forgot, or did you like his list?